You're listening to the King of the Fourth podcast, offering in-depth analysis on all things Boston Celtics, with your hosts, Jim and Mike Quigley.
Mike, the offseason's off to a wild start. We have a major trade, and I don't want to say we're in a new era of Celtics basketball, but significant changes in a way that we haven't seen in quite a bit have taken place with the Kristaps Porzingis for Marcus Smart trade. Obviously, we have the draft to talk about and what happens next. And, my views on the trade have evolved quite a bit, since it has taken place, my views on the roster. But I just want to start quickly with Marcus Smart because I think that's what deserves to start. Obviously he's been here for 9 years, Mike, and he made the playoffs every season he's been here. And the thing that I just admired most about him is just how much he cared about being a Celtic, how much he cared about the community, how much he cared about giving back. And there's not many athletes in this town that embrace being a Boston guy. Just even over the course of 20 years, you can probably only name a handful. There hasn't been a ton of Celtics. You think KG, IT, and I think Marcus Smart. And he loved it here. He embraced it, and he cared. He cared. Every game he was in there, sometimes it would come out the wrong way. And sometimes he would cost his team with over-aggressiveness or, erratic play. But I think on the whole, the experience here, was worthy, and he's going to be missed. And the culture of the team has definitely changed, both on and off the court. And it's going to be interesting to see how they adjust to that. But I admired him as an athlete. I admired him as the Celtics, and I admired what he brought to the community. So that's just my opening take on it, Mike. And I'll send it over to you.
Yeah, I think the continued talk about Marcus Smart as he leaves town is disrespectful. Like, people are just remembering him as this guy who dived on the floor for basketballs and that's it. No, he was the defensive player of the year 2 years ago. He's been first team all defense, all NBA. He isn't like some guy. He was one of the best players on the team. He was the best defender in the league. He was the first guard since Gary Payton to win the award. I think that gets lost in all this, that he actually is a really good basketball player. He had 10 assists in the first half of Game 1 against Miami Heat. He was a point guard. We noted this recently that they didn't need to upgrade at point guard because they had one. Jason Tatum had to change up his game at the end of games. That's what the Celtics need. I'm going to miss Marcus Smart. I loved watching him from the moment he got drafted. I remember that first season when he got hurt, and I was like, oh, shit, another Celtic that we drafted early on. He's already hurt. He's not going to be nothing. And then every year he was here, that team contended. The team picked up on his personality. The team responded to his leadership. He was the one who called shit about him, like he should have kept his mouth shut. But he was right, and the team listened to what he had to say, and they adjusted and made it to the NBA Finals. Outside of Jason Tatum against Miami, he was your second best player. I don't want us to get lost in that this guy and what he contributed to basketball. He's a very good basketball player. He isn't just a guy who flops and takes charges. He's not Patrick Beverley. He's an all-world defensive player. And I'm not saying you're saying that, Jim. I'm just the talk out here as he leaves town. We'll get into the specifics of it. The Celtics got a better player in this trade. That is obvious. But Marcus Smart was a great Celtic.
On the list of problems.
Yeah, I'm going to miss him.
And for the list of problems on this team, he wasn't really on my list.
Exactly.
Off season. And I know he's a lightning rod. Certainly with the media and some folks in town, where every time something goes wrong with this team, the finger gets pointed at him. It's kind of surprising to me how.
Can I make one more note, Jim, about him? My last note is I want to double up on what you said. This guy dyed his hair green, like he wanted to be in Boston. he loved it here.
Yeah.
Outside of like very few athletes that you can talk about, that is not the truth when it comes to being loyal to your team, the way Marcus Smart was loyal to the city. Like, so we traded away a guy that really, really wanted to be here. And I mean, that's a tough decision to make as a general manager. I got to give Brad props because I don't think I would have ever been able to trade Marcus Smart, if I'm going to be honest. So, I love Marcus Smart, and that Memphis Grizzly team, they're going to love him too.
Oh, he's going to be a good fit there. And what the word I was looking for, I'm surprised at how much of a lightning rod he actually is when it comes to this team, when things go wrong. And especially, with the advent of sports talk radio and things, late night television stuff. It's really unfair. It's interesting. Maybe at the end of the show, I'll try to get to it, some of the way they say things, make comments. But you don't get a lot of athletes, like I said, that really love being here, caring about it. Even the last 20 years, just in professional sports, in Boston, you think like Pedro and, Ortiz,
Dustin Pedroia.
Teddy Bruschi, Patrice Bergeron, IT and Marcus Smart. You don't have a lot that wanted to identify as New England, as Boston. And, it was shocking. And it was shocking in the way it went down because, you went, around.
What a 24 hours that was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Time. The day before the draft on Wednesday, and you're hearing these rumors, and Sham Sharadia is basically saying it's a done deal that Brogdon's going to the Clippers, and Mook Morris is going over to the Wizards, and Kristaps Porzingis is coming to Boston, and you feel like the momentum building towards that all day long. Then all of a sudden you get that Shams the Woj report around 11 o'clock at night, saying that deal is falling apart. The Celtics are still looking to move forward, but it needs to be completed by midnight. And about 10 of, 11:50 at night, you see the move gets made. I think initially everyone thought it meant Brogdon, and it turned out to be Smart going to Memphis and Porzingis and 2 first-round picks coming to Boston, which is, it was just stunning. It was just stunning. So I think that had a lot to do with the emotional reaction because you did not see that coming. It does raise questions with how it came together so fast that they must have probably already been talking Smart, maybe in separate trades.
Yeah, they had to have been.
Yeah, and so, which makes me think that maybe they're not quite done here, and I hope they're not because I don't think the roster makes a ton of sense right now. The more you look at it. And that kind of gets you over to the trade. And
yep.
On one hand, I hated losing Smart. On the other hand, getting Kristaps Porzingis and 2 first-round picks or whatever it is now with all the seconds is a lot. Is a lot more than I thought they would be able to get for Smart. So on the surface, that's a good trade. And Porzingis is a better all-around player than Smart, so that you look at that. The roster, though, and what we could talk about in a second, gets a little weird, I think, and the way they're going to play is going to be a little different.
Yeah, I mean, I look at this like Porzingis is definitely the better player, obviously, but I mean, what's going to be the better fit and who's going to be more reliable? I mean, Marcus Smart suits up and plays every night. Porzingis doesn't have a history of playing through injuries. He is 7'3". You do worry about those guys when they have bad knees and they have bad feet. And you already have Rob Williams who can't play every night. You already have an older Al Horford who you really got to cut his minutes down. So, I mean, I'd be and then you have Malcolm Brogdon, which you don't know what you're going to get from him. So it just feels like a lot of guys in this roster that you can't.
Think they end up trading him still? I kind of do.
We'll see. I don't know. I don't know I mean, if I could keep Grant Williams, I would trade Malcolm Brogdon, but that whole thing's a mystery with Brogdon. Like, how injured is he really? Because I'm hearing on the radio that even if he goes through surgery, he could be back by the beginning of the season. So it's like, well, if Malcolm Brogdon could be back by the beginning of the season, do you want to move that? Do you want to move the sixth man of the year, or do you want to keep that? Because that's like, that makes you better to have Malcolm Brogdon. I think, like, if Malcolm Brogdon's healthy, doesn't that make you better? Why would you trade it unless it's for money? And that's the other part of this that I'm interested in, is like, we moved out of the first round pick. Was that because we didn't have the player that we wanted, or was it money? And if it's money, are we not going into the tax again? Because if we're not doing that, we're really not going all in to win this year. So there's a lot of things to be thinking about with this offseason about, like, where are we? What are we doing? I'm not moving Malcolm Brogdon if I'm not getting a player back that can play at a close level to what he brings you if he's healthy. You know what I mean?
Well, I don't think this trade was about money. That's what makes it so interesting. So initially I thought, they're getting Porzingis and it's going to be a short-term rental. And that's why the Brogdon trade made so much sense to me. You kind of move off that money. You bring in Porzingis for 1 year. There's no draft picks going out. Fine. It just seemed fine. But now you're hearing that it's likely they're going to extend him once July 1st hits for a couple more years. So you're looking at, what, $36 million for the next, so $72 million over the next 2 years.
Yeah, he might ask for 40.
So it's not a money move in that sense. You still have the same issues that you're going to have. You're pushing them down the road towards another day.
But isn't there a thing if they go into the repeater tax this year that they pay a ton of money or something?
Yeah, so, there's that. So if you're worried about the repeater tax, and I don't know if the Celtics are or not, there are hard caps that you have to worry about once you go into the tax, where you're not able to make different moves and things like that. And that kind of made sense for pushing out the second round picks. Collecting a bunch of second round picks makes sense. Going forward with this new CBA, for a lot of different reasons, a way to make moves, to maybe move contracts out, or it's just like it's kind of good business. But I just look at the setup of this team right now, and you've gone from a team that is hard to defend, and didn't have a lot of weaknesses on the defensive end if they were all engaged, and obviously there was a lack of creativity with the coaching last year. They have some serious holes in this roster right now, and I almost feel like Brogdon, you kind of need that to bring in another starter level player, that contract, and maybe a couple of your first, to cover up some of those holes. I think this team is fine during the regular season. I think during the playoffs, there could be some issues.
Well, I do too, and I think, like, I heard a really good comment. Maybe it was Brian Windhorst, and he was just talking about how much he loves Smart, and just like, after a loss, what it would be like to interview him in the locker room, and after a win, it's like how much like the media loved him and stuff. And then he was just saying, like, with the Celtics, it isn't always about how they play; it's about the focus of their star athletes. And he was just like, I don't know if moving Smart actually fixes that problem. Like, and I think he's right. Like, obviously, we talked a lot about it during this Miami series. Like, they just couldn't score against the zone, or Jaylen Brown turns it over too much. It's just like really like maddening decisions that they make. And it kind of, to me, seems like no matter what they do, it's all about Tatum and Brown now. There are no excuses. At the end of the game, the ball can't find Marcus Smart's hands on offense. It needs to find your hands. It needs you need to be the guys. You need to be making the right decisions. And when somebody throws a zone at us, like, you guys on the floor need to make the plays. And I think, like, no matter what happens here, there is another step for those two to take when it comes to championship basketball. That that leadership piece with Marcus Smart is gone now, and it falls on them, right? Like, they're the best leadership now, right? Like, those are the veteran leaders.
Yeah, and like there's questions about this team's toughness. I think that rightfully questions.
Sure.
And they didn't get tougher. And the versatility is kind of gone. I think in terms of those
Mhm.
two taking a step, I think sure it's leadership, but I'd also love to see them start creating for one another. How often do you see Jason Tatum set Jaylen Brown up, or vice versa? And there's a lot of positives from building with two wings. You can create teams that are really tough to play, but it's not necessarily a perfect setup, and there isn't a perfect
so.
setup.
Yeah.
So,
Well, maybe Denver has the perfect setup.
well,
Well, they got the best player in the world, so that helps.
yeah, and there was a lot of parity and things like that in the league. I just look at this now, and you got a guy in Porzingis who you can definitely murder
You
switches
can post them
on.
up.
You post him up. He's a 40% 3-point shooter, so your shooting got better. He's a much better shooter than Smart. He's 7'3", so he can shoot over anybody. He defends a pick and roll, but you brought it up to me. He is going to be, you switch him out on the perimeter, he's going to struggle there a little bit. He isn't known for his toughness. He's left teams where his teammates really haven't loved him. So there are some serious questions about what it's going to look like with him here.
He's also been accused of some bad things too.
He did. He is coming into his prime at 27 years old, and he did have his best season of his career. He's one of the top 5 rim defenders in the league, one of the best players against the screening role in the league, one of the best efficient post players in the league. And that stuff's all great. It's also sometimes easy to do that over a course of 82 on a really bad team. What is it going to look like when the pressure is ramped up in the playoffs and they need him to kill a switch? Or, he's going into drop coverage and you have a guy like James Harden coming downhill.
I heard some really good.
What does it
Oh,
look
keep
like?
going. Sorry.
No, that's fine.
I'm sorry to interrupt you like that, but I heard some really interesting stuff from Scales where he was like, because I had told you that I was looking up his stuff from Dallas, because obviously last year it looked like he improved a lot on the defensive end. And some of the articles I was reading in Dallas was like you couldn't play him double bigs because it would just become a layup line, and Porzingis couldn't cover the pick and roll. So obviously he's made strides, right? And then in Dallas, I know we were asking about the coaching, but the articles I was reading were that he was refusing to post up. And that was part of the problem in Dallas. So, I mean, the guy's made strides. And what I found interesting from Scales, he said, I'm not comparing him to Dirk because he's never going to be Dirk. He said, but when Dirk lost to the 8th seed, when Dallas were the favorites to win the finals years back when that Baron Davis team beat him, there were guys like Baron Davis getting under him and not allowing him to post up and pushing him off the post. And there was all that talk about Dirk being soft because he was. And he came back that next season and he was just a monster on the post for the rest of his career. And he was a really good defender for the rest of his career, Dirk. Like, to think about that, like Dirk was a good on defense against Miami, Chris Bosh. What he was basically saying is like he kind of sees that with Porzingis. Like he saw that last year, like he left Dallas, there was all that talk, and maybe this is who he is. My concern is those previous 7 seasons, he was never this. But if we get that guy from Washington here in Boston and he plays, the Celtics nailed this and they should be the favorite, in my opinion. Like if we got the guy from Washington and that's who's here, and that's who's here moving forward with Tatum and Brown, I mean, this makes the world of a difference. It makes the world, but I don't know if that's him.
Look at that last game against the Wizards. They were finding ways to get Dirk in the post and get matchups and kill switches against Brown, Smart, the smaller guards. Years past, Smart would own him in the post defensively.
Yeah, Cal alluded to that, right? Yeah.
That didn't happen, and I think that was a consistent thing with Porzingis all year. That improvement. Hopefully that continues, but I still think they need more versatility on this roster right now. Especially if Grant's going, that's another guy that can guard a ton of different positions. That's another tough guy. And so you lose that.
Can I ask you a question, Jim? Is Grant going for any basketball reason at all?
Well, it would be if the coach doesn't like him. Yeah, then yeah, and I don't know that to be the case, but it sure felt that way. But Grant's a versatile basketball player. He's not a great player, but he's a versatile basketball player. I mean, even Smart, would take on the challenge of Gardner and Embiid in that series. Not that, Embiid struggled with it, but he did a good enough job to survive moments. They need more guys like that. I just look at it now with Brogdon and Porzingis, Mike. I see two guys that are really good offensive players. Porzingis, he had his improvement as a rim defender and as a, pick and roll defender. But a guy, if you get him on the perimeter one-on-one, he's going to struggle. Brogdon, I thought, really was not a good defender in the playoffs last year. I don't see them either one as versatile players, as guys that, you look and, oh, man, both sides of the floor, it's hard to find a weakness.
Yep.
I think there's still value for Brogdon in the league to get rid of him and bring something back. I think reason why the Clippers turned it down is because there wasn't enough time to get a physical in and the medicals with the midnight deadline.
That's exactly why.
Yeah, and so I tend to think that I'd be surprised if he's on this team, and I think that's a piece they're going to have to use. And I'm also quite comfortable with, not a ton of point guard depth. They bring in one off of free agency is fine. I think it's time to give Derek White a ton of minutes and to be the man here and let it run through him. And I think that's the other positive about this trade. I think Derek White was one of your top three players last year, and even with the Porzingis trade, he still might be.
Yeah, I think, Jimmy, you're making really good points. And the other part of it, too, that's missing from this conversation is Peyton Pritchard had, I think it was 7 straight games in the championship run the playoffs where he scored 10 or more points. And the kid he's shown that he can play at a high level. Under Ime, I don't know if he'll do this under Missoula, but under Ime, that guy was God in you. Like, I loved watching Pritchard play defense, and his teammates did too that year. So, I'm ready to let that kid play. And the interesting thing you're saying about Brogdon is what I'm hearing from Brian Robb. So B-Rob's been on 98.5 The Sports Hub a lot. He's got his own basketball show now. It's really good. And he was basically saying, there's got to be another move with all these second-round picks. And he's like you. He thinks they're going to move Brogdon attached to a package of these second-rounders. And he was like, because you have options. The Celtics can take back $28 million in salary for the 22 that they're offering with Brogdon. So that there are players you can bring back with that. And so I was thinking about it, if I'm a team like Charlotte and somebody's going to throw 4 second-round picks at my franchise and I got to take Brogdon on, would I be willing to move on from a guy like a Kelly Oubre or something? Yes. So I think there are still talented players that the Celtics could bring in with what they have after this draft night and, of course, with Brogdon's contract.
Yeah, be nice to get another wing. I think Haywood's on his last year there. I don't know if that's the guy you want to bring on, but you need
another injury guy.
Yeah, you definitely just need versatile players. And I think there's just too much. If I'm an opposing team, if I'm Milwaukee, with Holiday and Giannis, I look at the Celtics and I see a lot I can attack with those two guys next year. And I think the Celtics would really struggle to get through a series the way they constituted against those guys.
What do you think happens to Rob?
I think the Celtics are going to see this through with Rob and see what it's going to look like his first healthy season. He started to look more like himself, I thought, towards the end of the year. And, sometimes it just takes time. There was a lot of talk 2 years ago at the end of last season, will Jamal Murray ever look the same again? And he certainly looked the same this past season, and the first year he didn't. So I think you see what it looks like. If it doesn't look like much, I think he could definitely be a guy they look to move by the trade deadline for sure. And they need depth there too. There needs to be, in the addition of trading Brogdon, there still needs to be at least 3 players added to this roster. And so that's going to happen there.
And there'll be a lot of competition at these minimum contracts because Phoenix has to fill their whole team with minimum contracts. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, the Celtics, one advantage they have over Phoenix is they still have the $5 million mid-level taxpayer exemption. Phoenix doesn't have that, so that
If they're willing to use it.
Yeah, so they can bring somebody in with an option, and sometimes those players are helpful. Look, the Nuggets nailed it last year with Bruce Brown on that deal. So, yeah,
They did.
Yeah,
nailed it with Jeff Green at $3.9 million too.
Yeah. So I think with that, Mike, free agency starts next week, and we can circle back then and do another pod. But
yeah, you don't have any comments about about Chris Paul playing with Steph Curry? What that's gonna look like? I'm like kind of confused by it. So I see that he, out of all the point guards in the NBA over like the last 10 years, has the most assists, 3-point shooters. So he fits in, I guess, there, but Golden State likes to run. Have you ever known him to want to run? All right, anyways, we can talk about that in the next pod.
Yeah, no, hey, it's going to be interesting there. We'll see how much he has left in the legs. I have not thought about it with everything that's happened with the Celtics. I really haven't. But we'll catch up soon. When news breaks, we'll be back on. Free agency starts in just a few days, July 1st. So I'm sure we'll hear some more of that.
All right, see you later.